The year was 1487 CE, and at the heart of the Valley of Mexico, a city rose from shimmering waters like a vision pulled from the sun itself, Tenochtitlan. Canals glinted under morning light. Marketplaces buzzed with the cries of traders selling obsidian blades, cacao, and quetzal feathers. From a distance, its pyramid temples pierced the clouds, their stone faces washed in colors that mirrored the dawn. This was not a city of myth. It was the beating heart of an empire. Ruling over this world was a Huitzilopochtli, 8th king of the Mexica. His armies stretched the empire's reach from the Gulf Coast to the Pacific, demanding tribute in gold, maize, and blood. Every conquered people contributed to the lifeblood of Tenochtitlan, not merely through goods, but through living hearts offered to the gods. To the Aztecs, the empire was not just political, it was cosmic. They believed they existed at the center of a fragile universe where the sun, embodied by Huitzilopochtli, battled nightly against darkness. Each sunrise was a victory, but a temporary one. If humanity failed to nourish the sun with sacrifice, the skies would fall silent, the stars would devour the world, and life itself would vanish. This belief, woven into every layer of society, made the empire a living ritual machine. The people farmed, traded, and fought. Also, the sun could rise again. In this civilization, blood was not merely life, it was currency. Children were taught from birth that to shed one's blood, even through small ritual cuts, was to feed the gods. Warriors fought not to kill, but to capture, for each captive meant one more offering, ensuring cosmic order. It was a system of faith and fear so complete that devotion became indistinguishable from duty. But beneath the grandeur of markets and temples lay the constant rhythm of drums, low, steady, pulsing through stone and water alike. They reminded every citizen of the balance upon which they stood. When the sun hung highest, its heat blinding, priests looked up and whispered prayers that it might never dim. A Huitzilopochtli, fierce and ambitious, saw himself as the guardian of that balance. To honor the gods, he envisioned a temple that would touch the sky, a monument to divine duty and imperial power. The city obeyed. For years, laborers hauled volcanic stone, artisans carved serpents into stairways, and architects raised 2 sanctuaries atop a single pyramid. One for Huitzilopochtli, god of the sun and war. The other for Tlaloc, lord of rain and fertility. Together, they symbolized the union of life and death. The empire watched as this colossal structure grew higher each season, visible from miles away. Foreign envoys arriving in canoes would look up and whisper that the gods themselves must live there. And perhaps, in the eyes of the Mexica, they did. By 1487, the Templo Mayor was ready, a stairway of blood and sky. As the final stone settled, a Huitzilopochtli proclaimed that its dedication would surpass anything ever seen. Across the empire, messages were sent to allied and conquered cities alike. Bring your best warriors, your musicians, your priests, and your captives. As the sun set over Tenochtitlan, shadows from the twin temples stretched across the city like giant spears. The air was thick with anticipation and fear. The drums began again, slow at first, then faster, echoing through canals like the heartbeat of a god awakening. Tomorrow, the empire would prove its devotion. The Templo Mayor stood 60 meters above the city, its twin shrines glimmering with freshly painted symbols of flame and water. On one side, the red of Huitzilopochtli, on the other, the blue of Tlaloc. Between them, the stone staircase cut the sky like a blade. From the causeways, pilgrims could see torches flickering at its summit, hundreds of them, turning night into a trembling firestorm. King Huitzilopochtli declared the coming festival a dedication unlike any in recorded memory. It would reaffirm the Mexica's pact with the gods and announce to all rivals that the empire's power was divine. Messengers carried word throughout Mesoamerica. Every vassal must attend. Tribute flowed in, jaguar pelts, golden ornaments, incense, and captives. Thousands were marched from distant lands to the capital, bound but silent beneath the weight of fate. As the days before the ceremony unfolded, Tenochtitlan transformed into a living theater. Priests rehearsed chants that had not been sung in generations. Artisans adorned masks with turquoise and shells. Musicians tuned drums whose hides were stretched from the bodies of sacred animals. Women wove garlands of marigold to scatter along the temple's base. Even among the common people, excitement pulsed like current through water. They cleaned streets, repaired bridges, and prepared offerings of food. For them, this was not horror, it was holiness. To witness the rebirth of the sun was to stand at the center of the universe. But within the calm anticipation, there was also fear. Everyone understood what a Huitzilopochtli had promised, a spectacle of sacrifice so vast that even the gods would be astonished. According to legend, 20,000 hearts would be offered over 4 days. Some whispered that the number was too high, that even gods might choke on such blood. Yet others believed the empires might demanded proof on that scale. At dawn, smoke from countless incense burners curled over the city. Drums began their measured thud. From across the lake, the temple appeared to rise from a sea of mist, a mountain consecrated to heaven. The first prisoners were led to the steps, escorted by priests cloaked in jaguar skins and eagle feathers. The ceremony had begun. The drums did not stop. For 4 days and 4 nights, their relentless rhythm rolled across Tenochtitlan like thunder caught between the mountains. Crowds filled the plazas, nobles in embroidered mantles standing beside peasants and warriors, all staring upward as the ritual unfolded upon the summit. The first to ascend were captured kings from rebellious provinces, bound, painted with sacred pigments, their faces calm with resignation. At the temple's crest, priests awaited them beside a stone altar slick with fresh water and soon, with blood. Each priest carried an obsidian knife, so sharp it could split a hair. The air shimmered with heat and incense. When the moment came, chants rose in perfect unison. One priest held the captive's limbs, another sliced through flesh and bone with a single practiced motion. The heart, still trembling, was lifted toward the sun, a crimson fruit offered to eternity. A shout erupted from below, echoing through the city. The body, now empty of motion, was cast down the temple steps, tumbling end over end until it reached the base, where attendants carried it away to burial or ceremonial dismemberment. And then, the next captive was brought forward. Hour after hour, the procession continued. As one line ended, another began. Priests worked in shifts, their arms painted red up to the elbows, their eyes hollow from exhaustion. The smell of blood mixed with burning copal resin and maize beer. Witnesses spoke of a mist that never lifted, a haze of heat, smoke, and iron. Spanish chroniclers, writing decades later, struggled to describe what they heard from survivors. Bernardino de Sahagún recorded tales of an unending sound, as if the earth itself were crying. Fray Diego Durán wrote that a Huitzilopochtli gave to the sun more hearts than any man before him. Whether their numbers were exaggerated or not, even they admitted admiration for the discipline, order, and belief that drove the event. To the Aztecs, this was not slaughter, it was creation in motion. Each heart beat for the sun. Each drop of blood was a seed ensuring dawn. The priests sang that Huitzilopochtli, armed with a serpent of fire, was battling the darkness even as they worked. If they stopped, the world might stop with them. By the second night, exhaustion turned to trance. Witnesses said the priests moved like extensions of the temple itself, machines of faith. Musicians below drummed until their hands bled. Dancers collapsed in ecstasy. The city was possessed by divine madness. On the third day, even a Huitzilopochtli himself ascended the steps. Standing before the twin sanctuaries, he raised his arms to the sky and offered his own blood through self-sacrifice, piercing his ears and thighs with obsidian thorns. It was said that when his blood fell onto the stones, a sudden gust swept through the city, as though the sun had answered. By the fourth day, the great temple seemed alive, its stairways slick, its walls reverberating with heat. Birds avoided the skies above. The lake below shimmered red at sunset. And yet, the people cheered. For them, each heart meant safety, each death, renewal. When the drums finally stopped, silence fell like ash. Smoke hung over the city. Priests collapsed, their bodies trembling. A Huitzilopochtli descended slowly, crowned in feathers, his face unreadable. Behind him, thousands of hearts had been lifted to the heavens. The festival of dedication was complete. Night came, heavy and still. Across the lake, fires flickered where foreign envoys whispered of what they had seen. Some would carry the story home, others would never speak again. Far above, the stars shone cold and distant, as if watching humanity's desperate attempt to keep them burning. And in that silence, the drums began again, not in celebration, but remembrance. When dawn rose over Tenochtitlan on the 5th day, it shone upon a city transformed. The air was thick with the scent of incense and decay, mingled into one indistinguishable breath of holiness and horror. Along the causeways, priests washed the temple steps, their hands trembling as they poured buckets of lake water over crimson stone. For them, this was purification, a cleansing of the sacred stage upon which the gods had been fed. But for many, that dawn was heavy with unease. The people had seen wonders and terrors beyond imagination. Some whispered that the gods had taken too much. Others feared the balance had tipped, that in giving so freely, the empire had awakened forces that could not be controlled. King Huitzilopochtli, however, saw only triumph. From the palace roof, he gazed across his empire, a glittering jewel encircled by tributaries and enemies alike. He had given the sun more than any ruler before him. His name, Huitzilopochtli the water beast, would echo across the ages. And yet, deep within the temple shadows, the old priests muttered of imbalance. In the weeks that followed, signs began to appear. Heavy rains lashed the city, flooding entire districts. The causeways cracked. Granaries were washed away. Fishermen spoke of strange shapes moving beneath the lake's surface, as though the waters themselves had grown restless. The empire's triumph began to rot from within. Huitzilopochtli ordered new canals and dikes to control the flooding, vast engineering feats requiring thousands of laborers. But the rains did not cease. The more they built, the more the waters rose. The priests offered further sacrifices, praying to Tlaloc, god of rain, to show mercy. Yet no relief came. It was as if the gods had gone silent. Then, in 1502, amid the rebuilding, Huitzilopochtli was struck by an accident within his own palace. While inspecting the drainage channels, a wall collapsed under pressure, releasing a torrent of water that hurled him to the ground. He died days later from his injuries, coughing water from his lungs. The chroniclers wrote that he drowned, not in war, but within the very element he had sought to control. The empire mourned him as a hero, but in the whispers of the temples, it was said that the gods had reclaimed what he had stolen. With his death, the drums of triumph fell silent. The blood that had once flowed for the gods now seemed to have washed away the heart of the empire itself. And yet, even as the city wept, a new ruler prepared to ascend. A man whose reign would mark the beginning of both the Aztec Empire's peak and its fall. Moctezuma II was crowned in the summer of 1502, beneath banners dyed in royal blue and sacred red. Unlike Huitzilopochtli, he was no conqueror by instinct. A priest by training, Moctezuma was a thinker, a man of visions and divine dread. He believed the gods did not merely rule the heavens, they judged men. From the moment he took the throne, omens began to haunt his empire. The first came as a streak of fire across the sky, a comet that burned for nights without fading. Priests interpreted it as the torch of a wandering god, a warning of change. Then came the second. The temple of Huitzilopochtli caught fire, its roof devoured by invisible flames that no water could extinguish. Soon, others followed. Strange lights flickered in the eastern sky. A mirror was found within the body of a sacred bird. When the emperor gazed into it, he claimed he saw warriors riding beasts coming from the sea. The court fell silent. None dared contradict him. Moctezuma became restless, his mind a battlefield between faith and fear. He withdrew from the people, surrounding himself with priests and seers. He fasted, prayed, and sent offerings to every god he knew. Yet the omens multiplied. Lakes boiled. The wind carried voices. And every dream he dreamt ended with the same vision, the return of the gods. Unknown to him, across the vast ocean, Spain had already turned its gaze westward. Ships crept toward horizons no Aztec eye had ever seen. The age of gods was about to meet the age of guns. Within the palace, Moctezuma began to question everything. Could it be that the Aztec sacrifices had failed to please the gods? Had Huitzilopochtli's festival been too much, or not enough? To the common people, the emperor's uncertainty was invisible. To his court, it was terrifying. The man who ruled in the name of divine order was now doubting that order itself. In private, Moctezuma spoke to his counselors in riddles. The sun we feed each day, he said, perhaps it feeds on us instead. His priests urged greater devotion, more sacrifices, more temples. But Moctezuma hesitated. He wanted faith without fear, an impossibility in a world built on blood. Then, one night, a messenger arrived from the coast. He had seen floating towers on the horizon, ships of wood and iron, carrying pale men in shining armor. Their faces, the messenger said, were the color of bone. Moctezuma trembled. The omens had come true. He dismissed the messenger, but could not dismiss the dread. The gods, or something greater, were coming. And the empire, once drenched in blood to sustain the sun, now faced a storm from the sea that no sacrifice could hold back. In the spring of 1519, on the coast of Veracruz, the Aztecs met the impossible. Ships larger than temples rose from the ocean, their sails white as clouds, their hulls bristling with metal beasts that spat fire and thunder. The strangers who stepped onto the sand were not gods, but they might as well have been. They wore armor that gleamed like sunlight on stone, carried weapons that cracked louder than storms, and rode upon animals no Aztec had ever seen, horses, creatures that seemed born from legend. At their head stood Hernán Cortés, cunning, ambitious, and ruthless, a man driven by gold, faith, and destiny. To his small band of Spaniards, this new world was a divine opportunity. To the natives watching from the treeline, it was an omen fulfilled. When Moctezuma received word of their arrival, he did not prepare for war. He prepared for reverence. The emperor believed these men might be the return of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god, the deity who had once promised to return from the east in a year that matched the very one they lived in now. Cortés, hearing this from his translators, smiled. He did not deny it. Thus began a dance of deception and awe. Moctezuma sent gifts, gold discs as large as shields, feathered cloaks, obsidian jewelry. Cortés accepted them with humility but saw in them confirmation. The land was rich, the ruler uncertain. Days turned to weeks, and the Spaniards marched inland, burning villages that resisted, baptizing those who submitted. By the time they reached Tenochtitlan, even the volcanoes seemed to watch in silence. When the two men met, Moctezuma and Cortés, the city itself seemed to hold its breath. Chroniclers later wrote that the emperor stepped down from his litter, refusing to look taller than the man he believed might be divine. He spoke softly, saying, "Welcome, Lord. You have come to your city, to your house. Rest." Cortés bowed, replying, "I thank you, Emperor, for your kindness." But his eyes were already on the gold. For several days, the Spaniards were treated as guests, fed, honored, and shown the temples. Yet as they walked through the city, they saw the bloodstains upon the altars, the skull racks of sacrificed men, and the pyramids blackened with smoke. To Cortés, this was proof of heathen darkness. To Moctezuma, it was the order of the world. Two faiths, one of sacrifice, the other of conquest, stared at each other across the same room. Tension grew. Rumors spread that the Spaniards planned to seize the emperor. Others said Moctezuma plotted to destroy them during a festival. The truth was lost amid fear. Then, one night, Cortés struck first. With steel and fire, his men captured Moctezuma within his own palace. The emperor who had commanded millions now stood as a prisoner, guarded by a few dozen foreign soldiers. Outside, the people of Tenochtitlan whispered in disbelief. The man who had spoken for the gods could no longer speak for himself. From the palace walls, Moctezuma looked upon his city, the canals, the temples, the lake shimmering under the sun. He wondered if this was the price of faith, or its final test. The drums of sacrifice had long since gone quiet, but a new rhythm had begun, the march of conquest. The year is 1521. The sun rises red over Lake Texcoco, the color of smoke, of fire, of blood. Tenochtitlan, once the heart of an empire of stone and song, now stands surrounded by an enemy from across the sea. The conquest had begun months earlier. After Moctezuma's capture, chaos had consumed the city. The emperor, once revered as divine, now stood on a balcony, pleading with his people to obey the Spaniards, and was struck down by stones thrown from his own subjects. His death broke the empire's spirit. The Spaniards fled the city under a rain of arrows and spears, the night forever remembered as La Noche Triste, the night of sorrows. Hundreds drowned in the canals, their armor dragging them into the black water. Cortés wept beneath a ceiba tree, but his tears were not for the dead. They were for the gold lost beneath the lake. He would return, and this time, he would not leave until the gods themselves fell silent. For months, the Spaniards and their native allies, the Tlaxcalans, bitter enemies of the Aztecs, besieged the city. They cut off causeways, poisoned wells, and burned villages. Smallpox spread like wildfire, carried by the very breath of the invaders. The disease struck without mercy, killing warriors, priests, and children alike. Inside the city, famine began to take hold. The once bustling markets were empty. The canals, once silver veins of life, now stank of decay. People chewed leather, grass, even bits of clay to survive. Still, they fought. From the rooftops, the warriors of Tenochtitlan hurled spears and curses, believing that even in defeat, their deaths would feed the gods. For the Aztecs, to die in battle was not loss, it was transcendence. The Spaniards advanced, tearing down temples and palaces stone by stone. Every step forward was won with blood. The drums of war beat slower now, not from victory, but exhaustion. In the final days, as the city burned, the last priests of Huitzilopochtli gathered atop the Templo Mayor. Smoke rose into the heavens. They drew obsidian knives across their chests, offering their own hearts to the god who had once demanded thousands. They did not scream. When the Spaniards reached the top, the altars were already empty. The gods had been fed one last time. By August, Tenochtitlan fell. The city of water and light became a field of corpses and ash. Cortés stood amid the ruins and declared it Mexico City, in the name of the King of Spain and the God of Heaven. But in the silence that followed, even he must have wondered, was this victory or another sacrifice, this time to a different god? Centuries passed. The Aztec temples crumbled, buried beneath the foundations of modern Mexico City. The Spaniards built cathedrals over sacred ground, as if to smother the memory beneath stone and prayer. But history cannot be buried forever. In 2015, archaeologists from the Instituto Nacional de Antropología y Historia, INH, uncovered something extraordinary beneath the old streets, a wall of skulls. Hundreds of human remains arranged in a perfect circle, their faces staring outward, frozen expressions of devotion and terror. It was the Huitzilopochtli, the great skull rack of Tenochtitlan. The discovery shook the world. The accounts of Spanish chroniclers, long dismissed as exaggerations, were suddenly tangible. Yet the truth was more complex and more human than any conqueror had claimed. DNA analysis revealed that the victims were not only men, but women and children, taken from across the empire. Some were war captives. Others appeared to have been chosen for ritual reasons, perfect physical specimens, unmarred by scars or disease. Their skulls bore precise cut marks, evidence of ceremonial decapitation. No signs of torture, no random brutality, only ritual precision. The scientists and historians studying the site began to see the Aztecs not as monsters, but as believers bound by cosmic logic. To them, blood was not cruelty, it was necessity. Every drop was a dialogue with the divine. The archaeology told a story the conquerors never could, one of faith, fear, and human yearning for control over chaos. Among the skulls, one researcher whispered, "They did this to keep the sun alive." Another replied, "And yet, in the end, the sun set on them." Still, the discovery forced the modern world to confront an uncomfortable truth. Brutality and belief often walk hand in hand. Whether in ancient temples or modern battlefields, humans continue to trade blood for meaning. As cameras filmed the excavation, the light glinted off obsidian fragments buried for 500 years, sharp as the day they were forged. History, it seemed, still had teeth. The Aztec Empire is gone. Its temples lie in ruins, its language nearly silenced, its gods forgotten by all but historians and the few who still whisper the old prayers. And yet, the story of their blood ritual survives, passed from myth to legend, from legend to cautionary tale. But what if it is more than that? When we look at the Aztecs, we see horror. We see cruelty, sacrifice, and faith twisted into madness. But perhaps we are seeing a reflection, not of them, but of ourselves. The Aztecs believed the world depended on sacrifice. Today, our empires demand their own. Soldiers, workers, the forgotten and exploited, sacrificed not on stone altars, but on the invisible altars of power, profit, and progress. The gods have changed their names. The rituals have changed their shapes, but the blood still flows. Every civilization believes it acts for a higher purpose, to feed the gods, to save souls, to bring order or freedom. The Aztecs were not the first, and they will not be the last. In the end, their greatest tragedy was not their faith, but their certainty. They believed they were keeping the universe alive, and for a time, perhaps they were. The Aztecs believed blood fed the sun, the narrator whispers as the screen fades to the modern skyline of Mexico City. But perhaps it was fear that fed their gods. As the final drumbeat fades, the camera tilts upward toward the sky, the same sun that once looked down upon the great temple, still burning, still watching, still hungry.